Fanning. Weekends on 2FM.
Okay, there you go. That is Elevation, of course. All That You Can't Leave Behind is the album. I told you all about it a few minutes ago, and now I want to talk to Edge and Adam all about it itself. So, guys, first of all, just what it was, like it was the start of a new century, and the 90s had happened in the biggest way possible. Did you want to return in any way, do you think, to song arrangements that just consisted of, and whatever else happens to be thrown in there, but basically guitar, bass, drums, vocals?
Yeah, I think the clue is in the title of the album, which All That You Can't Leave Behind could be rephrased as only the things that you can't leave behind. So our thinking at the time was we're starting a new millennium. We're going to enter it with a blank canvas, but we do want to hold on to just the essential things. And for us at that moment, it was bringing it back to the simple sort of four-piece idea and songwriting being the main focus. So it was a kind of a clearing of the decks and a new beginning for the band, I think.
Okay, but when you say songwriting, Edge, about that, or Adam on this, I mean, I heard a point that I find it kind of strange. Did you want to have the songs together before going into the studio for this album? In other words, have your homework done? Or did Eno say, no, let's go into the studio and write in the studio? And if so, which one happened?
I think a bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, Brian always loves to bring a little bit of anarchy to the songwriting, and he gets bored if we're too structured and too organized. He likes having the possibility of kind of creating things on the run and other pieces coming up. And I think a song like Stateless, which didn't make the album, and a song like Levitate, which is also part of the re-release package, were all songs that kind of came out of that environment, but never actually made it to the finished record.
Okay, well, let's play that one now, Levitate, which is one of the new ones on the whole sort of Christmas present, I'll call it. Here goes. There you go, Levitate is what it is. That is from you too. That's one of the extra new odd things. I've mentioned it all before and will again too. We're talking here about the kind of big box set celebrating 20 years of All That You Can't Leave Behind. So, just taking a look, like, was there, do you think, some kind of acknowledgement of your past on this? I mean, I know that, like, the 90s Octung Baby was so brilliant, and then the irony and the Vegas and the passengers and the Zeropa and all the rest. But suddenly, like, we still want to look back at what we used to do in some ways. And was there a bit of an 80s thing about it in terms of the sound?
Maybe a little bit of us relaxing our slightly, I would say, almost fascist sense of needing to always look forward and never look back. It was for us, it was a kind of golden rule. We just do not rest on laurels. We do not repeat ourselves. We always forge into the future and look forward. On this album, I think we allowed ourselves to revisit certain sounds and certain approaches. But that being said, it was the beginning of a sort of a new phase of the bands in terms of trying to be super disciplined with songs. And on this record, I think there's some of the great songs of that decade were on All That You Can't Leave Behind. Beautiful Day, obviously, Kite, Stuck in a Moment You Can't Get Out of. We did really dig deep to get to those tunes.
And are you happy at the way it sort of strings together as an album? I mean, a bunch of great songs, but they really, would you take a lot of time saying which one follows which one?
Yeah, we did a lot of that, but also what was going to make the album, what wasn't going to make the album. I think Wild Honey, Adam, can you remember? I think that was sort of in and out of the album for a while because it seemed so wide-eyed and so kind of positive. But then in the final analysis, putting it next to Peace on Earth, which is so dark and so kind of in some ways negative. The most negative U2 song, I think, that we've ever released. So they balanced each other out, I thought, quite well.
Wild Honey was sort of really off the record until the very last minute when we were doing the sequencing. So to answer your question, we're playing around with it all the time, trying to get things to fit in. And Stuck in a Moment was a very heavy theme in that it dealt with Michael Hutchence' sort of premature death, which, there was a lot of feeling in us of regret and I think remorse about whether or not we could have done more for him at that time, or certainly to honor that relationship. Then, as Edge said, Peace on Earth is one of those very heavy songs which, you know, nobody knew at the time, but we were in the middle of the peace process, and the Omar bombing happened, which I think disgusted the whole country. So yeah, there's a lot in this record.
Okay, well, Peace on Earth, as you say, the Omagh bombing from '98, and then Peace on Earth was the song. But then it actually took on a whole new life post 9/11 as well in terms of American radio, and it just was a very different thing this century. But just to get back to what you're saying there about Stuck in a Moment and Michael Hutchence, you know, this was kind of a very big, sort of soulful ballad. I mean, what makes you say, let's get gospel in there, let's get a choir in there, let's get a piano in there, let's get horns, let's think about it maybe as lighters in a field when we're playing it to 80,000 people? Do you think along those lines?
Well, that song sort of grew organically. I started with the music in Tokyo on the Pop Mart tour, and I happened to have a piano in my hotel room. So I was playing around with some gospel chords and hit on some cool changes. Then back in Dublin, myself and Bono started working on the melodic ideas, and it was really at first it felt like a very sort of commercial melodic tune, but of course now you put the lyric about Michael into that context, and it gives it that intensity and that weight. And I think it's an example, I think, of why Bono is such a great writer. He does understand the need to create some kind of tension and almost dichotomy within a piece of music, that it doesn't sort of always follow the same trend. It's like you create tension between a lyric which is very heavy and a song that's very light, and suddenly you've got something that really has breadth and depth. So I think you know, a lot of our songs we start working on them. Beautiful Day is another example, and you've got this sort of sense of what it is. There's an instinct that there's something great in there, but to get to the final thing is often about unlocking these contradictions. So with Beautiful Day, it was very much a rock and roll tune early on, and it wasn't until Brian and Danny threw in this very robotic intro that we unlocked the kind of way to present that. So it didn't just sound like a bunch of lads in a rehearsal room. And the chorus of Beautiful Day is also, there's a song that's on the package called Always, which is a prototype version of Beautiful Day. But it was when we got that chorus idea that song started to really get exciting and show its potential. So it's often a very organic process. It's not like we sit down day one and suddenly the whole song reveals itself. It's like you follow the clues and you just keep an eye on the prize of you know, a great tune, a great song, and just you work till you unlock it, until you actually discover the potential of the tune.
Okay, well, you mentioned Stuck in a Moment, which I'll play later on, but I just want to stay with Beautiful Day for a second there. And I want to say, like, you know, you all have to agree on something. And I'm just wondering just how democratic does it get? And Adam, I'll ask you this because, like, I know that there was a kind of a tone on the guitar that Edge had for this song. And I think some of you said, no, wait a minute, that's too war. That's too 80s. I don't know if I want that. And Edge stamped his foot down. In fact, he probably picked up his pullovers and said, the ball, I own this football, I'm going home. Or something along those lines.
He's a very hard fella to work with, Dave. He's always pulling a straw.
But do you remember that? Was there a problem?
Well, yeah, Adam, you take this one.
It's hard for me to comment on Edge's genius in this situation, but that, of course, is what all of us have to do. Is at times we take a stand on something, and if we believe in it, you know, everyone will accept that, and it kind of gets through the democracy. And perhaps that's what democracy really is: somebody with a strong idea and everyone else rallying around it. And certainly Edge's guitar and his commitment to Beautiful Day made it the song that it is today, that we all know and love.
Well, but like with the song itself, the sessions did take quite a bit of time, and like, you know, so be it, because like with Pop 4 or 5 years before that, The problem was that you were really up against it in terms of having to take it out on the road, and you felt it was a bit rushed. So if All That You Can't Leave Behind has to take a bunch of time, then a bunch of time it will take. But one of the things that happened, Adam, was did you decide to go down to the south of France with the other guys as well and say, look, there's no reason why we can't work, rest, and play, as opposed to just be working and not going anywhere? Like, did it help to go to France and kind of, stretch the songs out?
Well, I don't know what the answer is to that question, because who knows? I mean, it turned out to be what it is. We were in France a lot of the time, and in some ways, we were coming off a run of playing Joshua Tree in stadiums, Zoo TV in stadiums. I think just collectively as a group of people that worked together, we wanted to be a little bit more intimate together, and whether that was spending time in the south of France or doing a stripped back album of the four of us in the room, I think that's what was in the air. That was the spirit that was in the air, and that's what this album represents. And it's great to go back to it now and see just the breadth of the songwriting, and indeed the sound of the band, and what we were doing with the basic elements again.
Well, the breadth of the songwriting. 2 songs win Grammys 2 years in a row. So let's take that first one we're talking about here, the opening song on the album, Beautiful Day. There you go, Beautiful Day it is. That's U2. We're looking at the album in all its glory that's out now 20 years later. And just a couple of other tracks I want to mention here. I mean, you mentioned it, Edge, Kite. There was something about the vocals when that was done. Like when Bono starts singing, I'm a man, I'm not a child, and his voice hadn't been good. Did you suddenly realise, right, this is really working now? Listen to that. That's Bono. That's what we need.
Yeah, that song's got an interesting beginning, because I was spending a bit of time in the studio on my own between our sessions and working with some string parts. So I came up with this little string loop, and when everyone came back, I think before Brian and Danny got back to the sessions, we had a chance, just the four of us in the room. I said, look, I got this thing. Let's just play over it and see where it brings us. So we all got in the room and just started playing over this string loop. And very quickly, you could tell there was something powerful happening. And I think you're right. Bono had been struggling a little bit with allergies or whatever it was. So the voice was a little troubling for him on the pop album. So this was like when he really found the melodic ideas for this tune, it gave him the most amazing kind of platform to use his voice in a new way. And the lyric again, I mean, he just knocked it out of the park. I think such a beautiful lyric about being a father and also being a son. This kind of how the two inform one another, and how the failings that you see, in your own parenting, you start to understand in some ways what your parents were going through and how difficult it is. So it's very personal, a really, really personal lyric. But I think those are the ones that really resonate. And he certainly, as a vocal.
Okay, well, I'm going to play the song now and just come back with one last question. The song being Kite. And just on that one, by the way, your dad, Garvin, his dad, Bob, can you remember the time when the two of them were walking down Madison Avenue, which maybe they had a drink too many, I'm not too sure. And, they started singing, the two of them together from the Silverfish. And it was just a moment. Do you remember that?
It was, yeah. I mean, they were giving out about how expensive the restaurants were, and but they got on great, and they had the same passion for opera. And actually, before my dad passed, I was able to bring him and my mom to meet Pavarotti, and Bono also brought his dad Bob. So that was like a bit of a high point. And there's actually one funny story, because my parents obviously were Welsh. They were quite excited to meet Princess Diana, who's there. Bono's dad was not quite as sure if it was something he wanted to do. So he wasn't quite so excited until she came into the dressing room, and then he just melted. It was so funny to see, like, all the years of uncertainty and kind of standoffishness and resentment just evaporated when this beautiful and disarming woman came into the dressing room and shook his hand. It was just great to see. And he in the end became a huge fan of hers, and it just showed us in some ways that I think we saw it with the Queen's visit to Dublin.
Yeah.
That it's actually the person. When you meet the person, it's very hard to not be affected. And I think it's a great lesson why we need to do as much as we can to maintain dialogue and connection, and not rely on the internet and blogosphere and emails and whatever, the social media to communicate. That actually that's a way to create division, and actually meeting people and talking to them is a way to create understanding and some sort of dialogue, which is what was so great to
Okay,
see
well
that
then
we're
let's play the
there.
song, which is Bono's father and Bono's son. This is called Kite. That's called Kite. That's from you two, of course. There's one last one I want to ask Adam this time. Adam, just as a final question. There was a danger in some ways to some people that you were becoming well known as kind of very clever and fashionable stylists with all the irony and the Vegas and everything else from the 90s. That basically this album, hold on a second now, it highlights our skills as writers. And that was a really good, like a bunch of great songs, in other words.
Yeah, I think we really wanted to have 10 great songs on this record, and if we could have 12, even better. And one of the favorites for me would be In a Little While, which again is Bono really channeling some great kind of soul singing and perhaps a Sam Cookish way into some great chords that came to us through Brian and Edge. And then the other great tune here, of course, is Walk On, which won Grammys as well.
Yeah.
And of course that, at the time, the story of Aung San Suu Kyi was very poetic and very potent in what she had done for the democratic process in Myanmar. And unfortunately, at the time of this current release, we've had to support the Rohingya people and mention that she hasn't stood up for them. Yeah. And that's a great shame. We've supported her, and we would have expected more of her, but the song is still great.
Okay, well, I'm going to play the two now, Stuck in a Moment and also Walk On. Adam, thank you very much indeed for talking to us in the programme today. Good man yourself. And thank you very much, Edge, as well. It's been a pleasure, as usual.
Always great.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, take it easy, guys. Bye. Bye. Well, I did say I'd go back to the lead singer of U2, and just because from 20 years ago, just talking about the album itself. So this is him talking.
People would be amazed at the chaos of the way a band like U2 record. You'd think that we'd have figured it out by now. And it's still like Quincy Jones says, you're sitting waiting for God to walk into the room and get you out of a jam or into one. And the plan on this album was to have the songs worked out before we recorded them. Like Tamla Motown. Brian Eno had heard some BBC 4 documentary about how Tamla Motown made all those classics with the Jacksons and whomever. And all the time was spent on the songs and the lyrics and the melodies and the arrangements. And then only a couple of hours spent on the recording of them, because that was the most expensive bit, bringing in an orchestra, bringing in all the equipment. And that's the way we came at this record. And I'd say about 70% of the record was recorded like that. But in the end, it was getting a little it was sounding like songs that had been written. And it was Edge was saying, this isn't what we do, really. We songwrite by accident. And we have to start some improvising, because that's what we are. And out of those improvisations came songs like New York, songs like In a Little While. In a Little While was made up on the spot, and most of the lyrics and the tune. I always hated the sound of my voice on the radio, and I was talking to Chrissy Hine from The Pretenders about this. She says, "What is it about your voice?" And I said, "It just sounds kind of constricted. It sounds uptight. It doesn't sound like it sounds when we're out playing live." She says, "Do you know the songs before you sing them?" And I says, No. She says, well then. She says, do yourself a favor as a singer, know what you're singing about. Because usually I'm writing literally minutes before we sing, or sometimes writing on the microphone the lyrics. And on this one I didn't, except for the 3 songs I mentioned, New York, In a Little While, and Grace.
And that's Bono talking about the album ultimately behind some of the songs. Here he is talking just about Beautiful Day.
It's a little bit of a haiku, Beautiful Day. I was writing about a couple of experiences that I had myself, and one person in particular who everything had gone wrong in their life, and they were down to zero, and suddenly, without the pressure of, relationships and possessions and baggage, if you like, they felt this great weight lift off them. And I think that might be true of people. I have another friend who's very, very famous in the world of computers, kind of invented computers, and he was running a business, had never left his room for years and years, and he was diagnosed as having cancer. So he thought, oh my God, I've had no life. What am I going to do? So he gave up his company, and he went out and started meeting people and all the rest of it. He couldn't believe it was so much fun, actually, the real world. And they cured him, and he's living now, and he never went back to the desk. And I just think, there's freedom in knowing that you need a lot less than you imagine.
That's Bono talking about Beautiful Day. This is an interview that I did, if I remember rightly, about a half an hour later they went up and played on the roof of the Clarence Hotel. This was done in Dublin. So I'll give you one last bit from that. That's from 20 years ago. This is, we played the song already of this one. This is him talking about Kite.
Right.
That's just with the kids doing a kite in Killiney Hill.
And then,
Likewise.
The song started off, in a kind of, all right, one of those kinds of moments where I was trying to be, to do the best I could with the little ones, and I'd taken them up Killiney Hill with the kite.
Yeah.
To do the thing that I'd read in the book, that you're supposed to do, and put the kite up, and it really did take off, and for about 5 or 6 or 7 seconds, and then just crashed and smashed. And the kids were like, now can we go home and get on the computer game now, and it was somebody that I knew was very sick, and there was a lot of worry in the air, and sometimes you can get strength from your children,